I was. I love that. Okay, so let's get going. So thanks everybody for coming. My name is Marcus Miller. I'm the director here at the Gordon Snellgrove Gallery. I just want to acknowledge and thank our Aboriginal brothers and sisters for sharing their land here, and the Métis. We're on Treaty 6 territory. I've got two people to introduce here, and then just before they get going, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Morgan. But first, John Schelling was brought in for this interview situation, and you know, we did talk like this just before this, and it worked out very well. It was kind of a nice format for an artist talk, and it was relaxed and having a kind of, I think of this as kind of talk show. So it's a little more loose and relaxed, and it's a nice format for these things. So we brought John Schelling in to be the interviewer here, and you know, I told John that he has to have a monologue here and start out with some really good jokes to loosen us all up, but I won't make him do that. He's just going to do the straight thing. John was a student here in the department, and we have we've got a print by you, I think. It was a very interesting print, and I think that came from your graduating show here, where John, I think, mapped out the gallery in some way that he won't be talking about today at all. I just wanted to mention that, though, to say that he's done his BFA here and that we have one of his pieces. John also more recently went to Langara College and did his, it was a, what was it? It was a publishing diploma. Because in fact you're a graphic designer and a journalist, really, as well as an artist, but that may be sort of in limbo right now or on hold for a bit. But just to say that you've got the creative side of you. John, in fact, was involved quite intimately with Black Flash magazine, still is, really, as you're the art director now, but you were the managing editor for many years, from 2008 to 2012. He worked at the Star Phoenix as the content manager, but you wrote stories there, yeah? No.
Well, I had an art column, so that's where I wrote articles, but it's a column.
A column.
Yes.
Those are stories, aren't they?
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry.
And John is going to be, of course, interviewing Todd Gronsdahl, who is the star this evening. Todd is having a show called Saskatchewan Maritime Museum that opens up at the Kenderdine. I believe I've got June 8th here, but in fact you've been on campus and you've been doing a residency here since May 23rd. That's ongoing, and so you're all invited to go to the Kenderdine and make sure that he's doing the right things and asking him tough questions and all the rest of it. That's kind of an interesting format for an artist coming in, and I think Jeremy's going to want to say something about that. Todd has also been a student here at the U of S in this department, and also at the Emily Carr University of Art and Design more recently. He had the good fortune to exhibit work in this very gallery, Gordon Snellgrove Gallery, in 2007, and the title of it was Innocuous Charitable Benevolent Brotherhood. I don't know what that means, but maybe you'll say something about that. Todd has been showing, he showed at the La Scala Gallery, and I think you had some involvement with getting that gallery going, which was, no, not at all. My information is all wrong. But I just make things up anyway, so I'll just continue along.
I think the gallery went back to like the 70s, La Scala.
Okay.
And it might have gone away then come back like that. It's been here for a long time.
Well, now it's gone.
Well, sorry.
And that's a health and safety thing. Todd is most recently, have you done this yet? Yes, you did a residency at Banff Center recently in March. And has this show has gone on at AKA Futures. You were part of that exhibit?
Oh, yeah, they curated it, and it's traveling kind of to a lot of little galleries around Saskatchewan.
Right, because that's an OSAC tour throughout the province. Right. He's a member of the Dynamo Arts Association in Vancouver. He was in a show called Mind the Gap at the Dunlop Art Gallery, several shows at the Mendel Art Gallery. I've got a show here at the Sakima Jenkins and Company Gallery in New York, Zeno Gallery in Vancouver, Pretty and Ink Gallery in London. And I think I'll just let you take it from there. But I do want to introduce Leah Taylor, who's the curator at the Kenderdine Gallery. Couldn't be here today. She's in Vancouver.
So what?
We don't care. And Jeremy Morgan, who's looking after the galleries here on campus as an interim manager, is here to say a few words about what's going on there. So Jeremy, please.
Yeah. Marcus, thanks very much. Thanks everyone for coming, and I'd like to particularly thank Marcus for all the support he's given the exhibitions at the Kenderdine College Galleries by hosting and doing all the arrangements and doing the recording for a number of these talks and conversations. I am mindful of when Marcus said that we'd had another conversation not that long ago. Is it that Robert Enright was the warm-up act for John Schelling? Like, we just need to get that straight, I think.
You forgot my order of candidates.
That's exactly. But that will follow after today, I'm sure. And I just want to thank the staff at the galleries for the work that they did and are doing in bringing Todd's work to everybody. The exhibition opens on the 16th, goes to the 19th, I think, of August, and there's a reception June 16th at the Kenderdine at 7:30 p.m. So until then, until the 15th, you've got a chance, though, to visit Todd in his lair as he brings the exhibition together. And I just really wanted to say a word about kind of this idea of an artist in residence also developing an exhibition that will be with us for some time. As some of you know, Leah Rosenberg was in the Kenderdine last summer, an exhibition that started some time ago with the staff at the galleries. And in January, we look forward to seeing Cameron Forbes in a similar sort of mode, both developing work and then having the exhibition somewhat longer term. So this is great for us. I think it's great for the university community, and judging by the audience, it's great for the larger, broader arts community. So Marcus, again, thanks very much for making these things happen. It's really important, I think, for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. So I wanted to just show some images of that show at the La Scala and then the innocuous Charitable Benevolent Brotherhood show, just because it's sort of slowly become the way I think about making things. So yeah, this show was in the hallway, and it's about 50 plus.
What year was that?
Maybe 2007, 6, around then. It was a bunch of illustrations of these real estate agents that back then you had to buy real estate from a magazine. You couldn't do it on the internet. So the magazine was called Elector Showcase, which I thought was like funny because it should be real estate showcase. But so sort of these characters would get their headshots and pose next to the houses they're attempting to sell. And I always enjoy sort of poking at like hubris and sort of maybe power in a way too. And through these drawings, like these faces became quite twisted, kind of sallow. So anyway, it was sort of a project I did, and I didn't really understand what there was about it that was engaging. But a lot of people really enjoyed these images and came with like a variety of takes on it that were things I hadn't thought of, but sort of gave me faith in making artwork by impulse without overthinking it. Like there's something to being the maker of it, whereas a lot of ideas and impulses I could never write down or explain, but through making this stuff I can engage with those. So next, starting with the same sort of form, was this innocuous charitable benevolent brotherhood, which was a sprawling conspiracy of pretty much anybody who was in Saskatchewan or from Saskatchewan. They were part of this conspiracy to keep sort of Saskatchewan in its place. So there's symbols and things like that. I was really into conspiracy theories. I still am, I guess. I'm a bit of a paranoid person. So I made this show, which would take sort of actual people from our community, or used to be from our community, and take social ills or problems in our community and then tie it to these people. I never ran into anybody who I used, but thinking back, maybe that wasn't so wise. But
You weren't far out of your circles, though, were they?
no, not far.
Like Andrea Menard was one,
Yeah.
and Jeff Rockstead was one.
Yeah, I ran into her at the dog park, but she obviously didn't see the show. So then I imagined this character, Orville Middleton, who is actually a person. He bought that board and bridge. I don't know if you remember this. He's an eccentric guy in his 90s who is my friend's grandfather. So I've worked with him in his yard, and he's just a wild character. And while I was making this, I was just sort of like channeling what would this guy, what decisions would this guy make? So he made sort of this analog blog where he would pull this trailer around. You could look inside and read things written on it, and it would disseminate his political sort of views and his conspiracy theories. So you'd open up inside and there's pictures of people, and it was supposed to be sort of like the layers of a mystery. You open up these little doors and there's other things behind them that link to different stories and stuff like that. So that's really when I started getting excited about making work through these imagined characters, and that's kind of how I still work now. So
How far was this from the Scout show? Like what year?
maybe a year later or so. Yeah, I was probably working on this when the Scala show was happening, and then and that was what I showed here, and that's what I showed to the Mind the Gap people. So
how do you go from like this idea of just seeing a realtor showcase and doing just sort of little portraits of them to then making like making it into like a bigger show, like almost an installation? How does that?
I don't know. I was always like a maker. Like I built a lot of skateboard ramps and renovated, my house and stuff like that. So I really liked sort of this discarded, crappy material, and just sort of like the chipping paint and the veneers and stuff. They always seemed valuable to me. Like I'd never throw away this material, like this old wood paneling and this like fake brick paneling. It just seemed, anything old seemed valuable to me.
Right.
So I think I probably wanted to include it, not understanding that not everyone would find that valuable. It would just seem weird and junky, but I was kind of going for a weird junky look anyway. So, and it just seemed like a funner way to display these. And I think originally I was thinking like that this work would never be shown anywhere, so at least I could like tow this hunk of crap around and people would see it. So that was like my secret mission maybe. So yeah. answer?
Sure.
Okay. So then you might recognize this on the bank of the Saskatchewan River at a spot called Devil's Dip near here. The city built a ski jump in 1917, and it was there for a year, and then they tore it down, and then they rebuilt it in 1936. So I always, like I have a memory of seeing it, which is impossible because I was born in 1976. But I always love the form of it, which is kind of why I included this. Like I think just that trestle structure, I just enjoy it. Maybe I have like an analytical brain or something. But sort of the paranoid side of me was like, well, what is this actually for? Because it's not for ski jumping. So I kind of came up with this idea, or I revealed this truth, that in World War II, there was a concern that Nazi subs would make their way up the river systems in Canada to launch an interior attack on Canada. And so in a way to, fight this unlikely occurrence, but also as a way to engage this part of the country in this nationalistic effort, the government came to the city and suggested that we build this projectile so that we could fire projectiles filled with wheat gluten into the river when these subs arrive, gumming up their prop, and then all the farmers could rush down and swim or whatever, run across this glutinous mess to the subs and capture these Nazi invaders. So, but let's make it look like a ski jump, because let's not alarm people. This is still 1937. This war is probably happening. We're probably going to get into it, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. But also, we need to build this out of materials that are here. So we're going to dig material out of the riverbed to make the ceramic projectiles. We're going to get the wheat from the fields nearby and grind it into gluten and process it. And we're going to build this thing completely out of wood. I have a slide. Oh yeah, this is a piece I made. So it's all made out of wood. It's fixed together with like dowels, and each dowel is fixed together with pins. So the idea is, so the Queen and Ottawa would get together, send these plans to Saskatoon, and then Saskatoon would find a bunch of industrious volunteers, and because we love Ottawa and the Queen so much, we would be happy to spend our evenings and weekends out in the bush, milling lumber, carving pins, carving smaller pins for the bigger pins, digging mud out of the river, and building this structure. So maybe that's where I started. It's still thumbing the nose at hubris and nationalism, stuff like that, which is sort of what we're doing a little bit with this project.
So for this one, this is a couple of years after the Mind the Gap show, is that right?
Yeah, after the Mind the Gap show, that was 2010-ish.
Okay. And then, so this one did this one have as, for that Mind the Gap, for the Mind the Gap one and the one in Mendel, you had a lot of text panels explaining all of this backstory. For this one, did you have the same thing?
No, I think I was toying with a couple things at the time, and one is I was trying to make work without humor and make work without text, and it just kind of fell flat. I didn't enjoy it, so I just kind of came back to it.
So this was without humor though?
No, this was without text.
Because it's quite fun.
Yeah, it's still but you need something. I obviously was I need a didactic panel or something.
Well, I guess I ask because I wonder if the narratives you make for these objects, if they're important for everybody to know, or if somebody can just come and see this I don't know, funny ski jump and take something else from
Yeah.
it?
I think it's like an attractive object,
Right.
and it's like ridiculous. So, but I definitely like when I'm building these things, it's really important. Like the story is really important to me.
Right.
Like it gives me energy and it drives the project. Like I get all excited and start giggling and making these things. So that it is important to me for that. And I think it's important to share the sort of inside joke, if you want to call it that or whatever. Yeah.
How does your work go from like the wacky or the weird junkie from the other from the show in the Dunlop to this is pretty it's very, I don't know, it looks pretty compared to the rough kind of way the other one looked. How do you get from there to here?
Well, like that first, the real estate thing, that was probably like done over a week. And then the second one was done over like 3 weeks. And then that trailer was maybe done over 2 months. And then this was maybe done over like 2 months or 3 months. But I think at first, like the impulse was to just get this out of my system, you know?
Mhm.
Like I didn't really understand. I mean, I shouldn't say I don't understand I was making art, but I didn't understand that like it would go anywhere. So I was just like, let's get this project out of my system. I'll get a kick out of it. I
Right.
go on with my life. And then as people saw the work and enjoyed it and wanted to exhibit it, then it was like I got a little more time. There's a time restraint. If you have 2 weeks, what can you do in 2 weeks instead of a weekend? This, I'm not sure why I ended up going. Oh, I know why. I took a class with Jordan Schwab here, and in his workshops, like he would teach you, and you'd have like this little lab, and then you'd come back next week. So after an hour in the lab, he'd say, okay, so that's how much you can get done in an hour. Now I want you to spend 10 hours between the end of the project. And it was like a complete foreign idea to me to like really develop, I guess. So that was a great lesson, you know, I took to like just develop it and just put use time as a material, I guess, you know. I'd never thought of using time as a material. So, yeah. What else do we got? It's just like a scale image of it. So it's about 16 feet to the aerial, and then the aerial was like another 5 feet, which is maybe interesting because I built that in Vancouver and my studio space was, I think it was 10 by 5, but it was like 20 feet high. So I just ended up kind of going up. It's the only option in that studio, which is kind of like I used the metaphor of a turtle in a terrarium will get as big as the terrarium. So that's sort of how it would go. So this is actually the thing that's going with the futures. And this is, I call this the missile hopper. So it fits on top of the jump where the aerial is. And then when the Nazis inevitably show up, we pull the string, the missile's full of glue, start firing down the ramp, and the rest is history. So that's how it looks set up to fire.
So do you do you draw this first, or you just start going?
This, I think I just had one of those forms, and I just flipped it upside down one day. And it just looked like a basket, so I just kept that in mind. So I think I just started doing it. These are just some of the projectile shapes I chose that never went anywhere because they're funny enough. And that kind of brings us to this project. So,
Okay.
you want to explain it?
Sure.
So this is the first iteration of this project, and it was for some small like exhibit or something. And so my joke was, it's the Saskatchewan Maritime Museum, and it's about 6 or 8 feet across and maybe like 18 inches deep. So you go in the one door and there's like 2 objects, and then you go out the back door because we don't really have it in maritime history. So it's just, and I also wanted the artifacts to look like they were homemade. So they're like, well, if we had an artifact, this was what it would look like in a museum. You know, so, and I also like the idea of like having like a big sign and decoration, and then it's like empty.
And from that, you go to, like, how do you turn this one line, it's kind of a one-liner, into the bigger show that's happening now in Canada?
I kind of just left it like for a while, and then I started working. Actually, I think that project came before the ski jump project, but sort of within the same year.
Okay.
So I was kind of working on them separately. And then when I met with Leah, we discussed them both. And she just saw more in the Maritime Museum project than just this one-liner.
Okay.
So we started discussing it, and this was mentioned, but this project is along with the archives here on campus, where we're sort of delving into there for resources and ideas and sort of material I can use to prop up or prove my theories and my speculations, I guess. So.
Do you want to talk about this project now, like as a, what are your theories?
Sure, yeah. The show is interesting to me. I mean, there's sort of like 3 levels. Like, I think the pieces are pretty. There's a funny joke. Haha, this is Saskatchewan, where we don't have a maritime museum, and haha, he's coming up with these crazy people. And then it's sort of the third level where I'm interested now is sort of like thinking about how we make history, how we make decisions about what is to be included, what's not supposed to be included, and sort of the power we give objects by archiving them, storing them in a space with a staff of people to take care of these objects, and then some things we discard. And sort of by making this imaginary museum, it kind of, I started thinking of like, well, we have museums everywhere, and this was somebody's idea to start this, and were their intentions any more valid than mine, or any more pure? Or then art objects, museums and art objects at museums as well. Like, I guess, you know, as I age, I just maybe feel a little more cynical about that. Like, maybe we're collecting the wrong things, or maybe I don't value those things the same way when you get the context of them, you know. And then rather than to
So
write a
would
paper
you-
or something, I'm gonna make fun of it, I guess.
Would you say it's like your thumb in your nose at the museum, or is it a love letter to the museum? Like, where do you sit on that line?
I think it's more maybe like a comic strip about a museum. So like, by making these objects that are like striking, and this one-line joke, you can get people to pay attention,
Right.
and then I can maybe like I'm not presenting this as like Todd's steaming letter to museums and why they suck. I'm just sort of like, are museums crazy? And have you ever thought about why we do this or how we do this? And maybe people are like, yeah, maybe no. Maybe they just are like, Saskatchewan doesn't have a coastline. This is bizarre. and the helmet looks kind of neat, you know, which is fine too, I guess.
One thing I noticed through all of your work, there's sort of this humor about the place where you're from. Where does it, I guess I'm wondering, why do you find Saskatchewan, like what is it about Saskatchewan or Saskatoon or the prairies that's so funny to you? Not that, and I don't mean that in like you're thumbing your nose at the prairies, but
I guess I see a lot of my foibles in Saskatchewan. So, and I can't speak for everyone, so I'll just speak for myself. Like, insecurities about not being from the capital city and being from the important areas of Canada, being ignored largely, and also because we are isolated, we still have this sort of provincial qualities that maybe in larger centers where culture is moving a lot faster, we speed past them. Like for example, being in Vancouver in the 90s and being there now, it's not the same place at all. It is a city full of like large steel and glass buildings and chains and things like that, and you know, you can't just roam the streets and be a brat and stuff. I know it's cleaned up, you know, whereas Saskatchewan, well, like going back to the ski jump, like there's a video I pulled from the archive, or they gave me really, but like they've launched this ski jump down a riverbank, land on the river ice, and stop before they hit the water. And they're sending their children, there's like a kid doing it, and it's like, there's something awesome about that. Like, I don't know if I'd send my kids down there, but I would have done that, you know. And I feel like in Saskatchewan, and especially outside of the city, like I make work in Vonda, where I have my studio, and it is fully Wild West out there, you know, like the neighbors are burning their garbage and jumping their dirt bike over it, and it's just like that I love that about Saskatchewan. Like, it's still wide open in a lot of places. Not to sound punny, but then there is sort of this suspicion of outsiders. Maybe that's a provincial thing too. I think people have suspicious or paranoid perspectives, much like I do. Yeah. And I don't think I don't see much of that perspective, so it's interesting to share it to me. Was that the answer to your question? Sure. Let's see what else I got. Oh yeah, so this is one thing I didn't really expect, but it's kind of developed during this show, is how I would use text with these objects, ideally, you know. So Charles Gasper is the character who I've invented that, he's sort of this Elon Musk character from Saskatchewan in the 30s. I think there's a real sort of like do-it-yourself ethic here, especially like among farmers and artists, and you know, hacking their tiller or whatever. So this character I've imagined comes from that, maybe self-taught, maybe outside, but you can't dispute his breadth of capabilities and his resourcefulness, and so he's kind of self-made man. So part of my idea is that he was the designer who designed this projectile system, and thought he should hide it in plain view as a ski jump. And he also invented the Gasper helmet, which, you know, another one-liner. But this is how I sort of vaguely introduced this concept about, you know, his grandson came to look at these old memories, and so now you're like, well, okay, you're introduced to the idea that there's a character, he's not around now. Yeah, so. Another one, sort of, I imagine your grandpa, like mine, would haul crap around in dangerous ways. And he would just like nod it off and then maybe nod it to the mirror of the truck too, for like extra security. And I always sort of notice these things. Nautical flags.
Did you create meanings for like every flag that you? How many flags do you have in the show?
There's like 7. I like the idea, like each of these are like separate little exhibitions within the show, like a museum would have. And this nautical flag one is called Nautical Flags, Meanings and Mysteries. And sort of the idea is like, nautical flags, they're a thing. What do they mean? Who knows? It's lost to history, you know? And there's sort of like a defined ignorance and sort of a naivety as well that I think is like fun, you know? And it sort of is like a levity that would go through all this too. And then this is my character. So like a local amateur actor approached me to do a project that for a film. So I thought of him when we wanted to have this old-timey picture of him. And then the cape is a Supreme Court cape from the archives. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So these, like, because I haven't seen these in space. These, how are these going to be?
I'm not sure. Like I was just disseminating them on Instagram, which seemed like a great way to use all these objects and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how it would make it into this project or if it will, but through hashtag, I suppose, people would find it.
So these won't actually be in the gallery then?
I don't think so.
Okay. But it informs your backstory, so you're...
Yeah, so if people look up the hashtag SK Maritime Museum, there's like a few of these with sort of hints to what they are.
That's interesting too, because you see the museums now are doing things like that to try and engage their audiences more. Did you think about that at all?
No, that just happened, which is kind of like fun part of a residency.
Mm-hmm.
It's like these things pop up and yeah, there's something there I definitely like to do more of somehow.
How is it going? How is going around? Like, because you've been on university for a while and you've gone to a bunch of different things that maybe you didn't know about before you had the residency. How is that? What's that process like, and how's that changed? Like the idea of the show from when you first started.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought when I started. Yeah. I mean, I had ideas about what would fit in the gallery, and I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I have to, like we've had to edit a lot of stuff, which is actually kind of good because I'd rather make a ton of stuff and edit it down than to try to stretch it out. Being on campus, there's like a nervous energy here, sort of uncertainty. I don't know, being in the science building, it's pretty interesting to we're getting a lot of people in who aren't from the art world, and they're really excited because maybe my work looks vaguely sciencey,
Right.
you know, with the trestles and stuff, and there is a work I'm building that's boat. This is another one of Gasper's inventions. So I'm paneling in all the gaps between the trestles now to sort of build the form of this pedal boat. So yeah, a lot of the people in the building are physics guys are coming by and just want to like talk about Tinker Toys in their childhoods. So it's kind of fun. Yeah,
So Todd, you're building these things in the gallery? And,
yeah, yeah. That,
and like, are you cutting wood and like really like making stuff?
I
or-
was, and then this past weekend I decided that, like you can see, like there's some things set up, there's some objects from the archives in there. So I decided to take the material out to Vonda, rip all the material I could, and now I'm just using like hand tools, just so I don't raise so much dust that I'm gonna damage these things or cause a problem, so. Health and safety, again. So.
One question I had about, you did a interview in 2007 with Uggs magazine where you talked about, I'm just going to find my quote here. You didn't really relate to what you were seeing from people in art school. Has that changed? You've been through art school now, and now you're working in a gallery that's represented by an art school. Has that changed at all?
I'm trying to think about what art school was like. There wasn't like much funny things happening in art school. Art school kids weren't terribly funny. I mean, I stuck out
Yeah.
probably more than they did, you know, being an old person. I think kids thought a lot about careers. I didn't. You know, maybe that's Vancouver. Maybe there's an art scene there and you can make a career. I mean, I always found that people were engaged with what I was doing. So it wasn't like I was a complete foreign mess. But I mean, I guess it's like anything. Like I don't relate to a lot of restaurants in Saskatchewan. You know,